The kingdom of Arendor lay beneath a sky that seemed always to threaten rain. Its towers pierced the clouds, but even the strongest stone walls could not hide the fear that had settled in the hearts of its people. Rumors traveled faster than the wind, whispers of curses, betrayals, and one woman whose name was spoken in both awe and dread, Leora. They called her a rogue, a thief, a shadow who could vanish from the sight of the most watchful guards. Some claimed she possessed strange magic. Others said she simply moved too fast, too clever, to ever be caught. Yet nobody truly knew her. Leora lived at the edge of the kingdom, where the forests grew dark and the roads became treacherous. She owed no loyalty to kings, nor to the laws that bound the weak. But she had a code of her own, one written in the ink of survival and quiet justice. The Alpha, ruler of Arendor, was a man of power and pride. His family, especially his young sister, Lady Ilara, was precious to him, yet vulnerable. Political enemies and hidden sorcery threatened their lives constantly. The guards, loyal though they were, could only do so much. And tonight, the Alpha's worst fear came true. A shriek echoed through the halls of the royal estate. Lady Ilara had been taken. The kidnappers left no trace, save for a trail of scorched earth and dark symbols carved into the walls. Panic rippled through the palace like fire. The king's men scrambled, but even the bravest warriors felt the unease settle in their bones. It was no ordinary theft. Kael, the Alpha's captain of the guard, stood silent in the chaos. His eyes were sharp, scanning the courtyard and the city beyond. Kael had always been disciplined, loyal to a fault. He obeyed orders without question, and yet, even he felt unease. The attackers were no common thieves. They carried with them something older, darker, and terrifyingly clever. It was then the rumors reached him, carried by a trembling messenger. The rogue, Leora. Kael frowned. He had heard tales of her cunning, but he did not believe in myths. Still, in moments like these, when darkness grew thick and threats multiplied, one sometimes hoped for legends to be true. Far from the city, Leora crouched atop a moss-covered ridge. Her dark hair framed a face that had seen too much, yet carried a quiet strength. The wind tugged at her cloak, but she did not move. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, where a faint glow marked the path of the kidnappers. "They think they can hide in the shadows," she murmured to herself. "They are wrong." She had once lived among noble families, her own house destroyed by betrayal and greed. She had learned quickly that power and privilege often carried cruelty. That knowledge had shaped her into the rogue people feared. Yet beneath her sharp exterior, a sense of justice remained, a desire to right the wrongs that others ignored. And this kidnapping was one such wrong. As night fell, Leora moved with the silence of a ghost. Trees bent beneath her passing, shadows clinging to her form. She could hear the faint murmurs of her prey, the kidnappers, and the faint, frightened sobs of Lady Ilara. The girl's courage was evident, even in fear. But she would not survive long in the hands of these sorcerers. Kael, following at a distance, cursed under his breath. He did not trust the rogue, yet there was no one else capable of tracking the kidnappers with such precision. She moved through the forest as if she belonged to it. Steps measured, senses alert. He kept his distance, careful to remain unseen. Each moment spent behind her made him question everything he had believed about loyalty, about danger, and about what it meant to be brave. In the heart of the cursed forest, Leora found the kidnappers' camp. Black tents stood like monuments to fear, their entrances marked by glowing runes. Shadows danced unnaturally across the trees, whispering threats and promises. Leora's hand rested lightly on the hilt of her blade. Her heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with determination. She struck at the moment they least expected, moving like wind and smoke. A sorcerer who had tried to summon shadows screamed as her blade cut through the air, the shadows dissipating in an unnatural hiss. She fought with precision, every movement calculated, every strike designed to weaken without unnecessary cruelty. She was rogue, yes, but she was also protector. Kale watched, heart pounding. He had expected a thief, perhaps even a killer. But this was something else. Leora was a storm, fierce and unstoppable, yet guided by something he could not name. Respect tinged with awe filled him, and something else, a dangerous, unspoken curiosity. He realized then that her reputation was only part of the story. She was more than legend, she was necessity. A force that the kingdom might desperately need. The battle reached a crescendo when the leader of the sorcerers stepped forward. A tall figure cloaked in darkness, with eyes that seemed to burn with unnatural fire. He raised his hands, and shadows surged toward Leora, curling like snakes. She stumbled for a heartbeat, caught off guard by the raw power. Kale, she whispered to herself, though the words carried no hope. I cannot do this alone. Kale stepped forward, breaking his own rules, revealing himself to the enemy. His sword gleamed in the dim light as he cut through the shadows, reaching her side. Together, they fought not as rogue and guard, not as stranger and soldier, but as two forces converging against an overwhelming darkness. The battle was fierce, the forest itself seeming to resist their presence. Shadows tried to pull them apart, whispering doubts, fears, regrets. Leora felt her courage falter for a brief moment, the memories of loss pressing down like stones. Kale's hand brushed hers as they parried a strike together, and in that fleeting touch, she felt something she had not expected: trust. But just as victory seemed within reach, the sorcerer's leader unleashed a final spell. Shadows coalesced into a wall of darkness, separating Leora from Kale. The rogue was trapped, surrounded on all sides by malevolent power. The whispers grew louder, twisting into voices that only she could hear, calling her past sins, her failures, her fears. Kale's shouts reached her ears, but the darkness was thick, heavy, and almost alive. Leora! Hold on! He called. His voice was fierce, commanding, yet laced with something tender he did not understand himself. She squared her shoulders. The rogue did not break. With every ounce of strength, she summoned the skills honed over years of survival, striking, dodging, and weaving through the magical assaults. She would not fall here, not when the Alpha's family hung in the balance, not when the kingdom itself teetered on the edge of chaos. The forest trembled around her. Shadows hissed and writhed, and Leora felt the pull of something ancient and cruel. Yet even in that darkness, she found a flicker of light within herself. A rogue, yes, feared and misunderstood, but also a force of change, a spark of hope in a world that had forgotten it. Kale's figure blurred in the distance, blocked by the wall of magic. He could do nothing, only watch and hope. And Leora, standing alone in the midst of the shadows, whispered a promise not only to the Alpha's family, but to herself. I will not fail, she vowed. Not now, not ever. And with that, she vanished into the darkness, moving deeper into the sorcerer's trap, determined to face whatever came next. The wind carried Kale's voice after her, though she could not hear it through the thick shadow. I will find you, rogue, whatever it takes. The forest fell silent, except for the whispers of shadows and the distant echoes of a rogue who might change the fate of a kingdom. The darkness of the forest thickened as night deepened. Leora's steps were silent, yet deliberate, weaving through the maze of twisted trees and creeping shadows. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind, could conceal danger. She had faced peril before, but the magic here was different. It was old, cruel, and clever. It was a trap designed not just to test the body, but to attack the mind. She had been walking for hours, each step taking her closer to the heart of the sorcerer's lair, yet further from any hope of escape. The whispers of shadows pressed against her ears, voices twisting memories and regrets into sharp daggers. You are not strong enough. You are alone. You are nothing. Leora clenched her jaw. She had heard these lies before, and each time she had overcome them, she moved like a shadow herself, slipping past enchanted roots and flames that burned without heat. Every obstacle was a puzzle. Every trap, a test. She thrived in this kind of danger. Far behind, Kale struggled to keep up. The forest seemed to resist him at every turn. Branches clawed at his cloak, and shadows slipped between his vision. Still, he pressed on, guided by instinct and determination. Leora was not just a rogue, she had become the pulse of the chase, the fire that could not be extinguished. And he was drawn to her, despite himself. He remembered the first time he had seen her fight, how she moved like water over stone, graceful yet lethal. There had been no hesitation in her actions, only precision. And yet, behind that precision, he sensed something else. Fear held in check. A quiet defiance. A spark of humanity that refused to be crushed. That spark was the reason he could not leave her to face this alone. In a small clearing, Leora paused. The shadows here were thicker, almost solid, moving, like living things. She knew the sorcerers had laid their most dangerous traps here, anticipating that anyone brave or foolish enough to follow them would falter. She knelt, tracing her fingers over ancient runes carved into the stone. Their power pulsed beneath her touch, dark and insistent. She muttered an incantation under her breath. Words learned long ago in the libraries of her destroyed house. Words that bent shadows without breaking them. The runes glowed faintly, then dimmed. A sigh escaped her lips, though her body remained tense. She was skilled, but she could not predict everything. The forest had its own will tonight, a will that sought to separate, confuse, and consume. Kale arrived just as a shadow serpent leapt from the trees, eyes glowing with unnatural fire. Leora was ready. She rolled to the side, slicing the serpent in half with a flick of her blade. Kale's sword followed a heartbeat later, cutting through the trailing shadows. They stood together in the clearing, eyes meeting briefly. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary here. Their coordination was instinctive. She moved. He followed. He struck. She countered. Together, they became a single force against the darkness. For a moment, amidst the danger and tension, Kael felt something he could not name. It was respect, yes, but more a strange warmth that surprised him. He had followed many warriors, fought alongside many soldiers. But Leora was unlike any he had known. She was wild, untamed, and yet principled. She was fearsome, and yet she was human. "You shouldn't have followed me," she said quietly, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of relief. "I couldn't leave you," he replied, his tone firm, almost defiant. "You're not meant to face this alone." Her gaze softened for a moment before she looked away. "I work alone," she whispered. "Always have. Always will. Not tonight," he said, stepping closer. The forest seemed to lean in with them, listening. "Tonight, we work together." They pressed forward, deeper into the sorcerer's territory. Each step was a dance with danger, enchanted roots, shifting stones, and illusions that tested their perception. Shadows whispered again, voices changing their form, becoming images of their worst fears. Leora saw herself as a child, abandoned and powerless. Kale saw failure, the faces of those he could not protect. Yet together, they resisted. Their bond grew, quiet but strong, forged in the fires of adversity. She began to trust him not entirely, but enough to share the burden of danger. And he began to see her not as a rogue to be captured or punished, but as a woman of courage and purpose. Hours passed. The forest gave way to a narrow canyon, cliffs rising like black teeth against the moonlit sky. At the canyon's heart was a fortress, dark and foreboding, surrounded by a moat of swirling shadows. Lady Alara's cries echoed faintly from within. Leora crouched, assessing the fortress. The walls were enchanted, and the gate sealed with a spell of binding. She turned to Kale, determination flashing in her eyes. "This is it," she said. "Beyond these walls lies the family we must save. But the sorcerers have prepared for us. We'll need more than blades." Kale nodded. "We have each other. That is enough." They moved silently, using the shadows to their advantage. Leora's knowledge of the old ways, combined with Kale's discipline and strength, allowed them to slip past guards and wards that would have trapped anyone else. It was a test of patience, skill, and trust. As they neared the inner courtyard, a wave of magic erupted. Shadows leapt from the ground like living tendrils, wrapping around them, trying to separate them. Leora struck with precision, her movements a blend of elegance and force. Kale followed her rhythm, parrying, striking, protecting. For a brief moment, their hands brushed as they struck simultaneously. The touch was fleeting, but it carried a charge neither could ignore. The world narrowed to the beat of their hearts, the rhythm of their movement, the unspoken connection that had formed in the midst of chaos. The shadows withdrew, and they reached the courtyard. Lady Alara lay bound upon a stone dais, pale but unharmed. Relief washed over Leora, though she did not allow herself to linger. The sorcerer's leader appeared. A figure cloaked in darkness, eyes glowing with malice. "You are clever," he hissed, "but cleverness will not save you." Leora met his gaze steadily. "Maybe," she said, "but courage and will can." Kale stepped beside her. "And you will not harm anyone else tonight," he added. His voice carried authority, but there was something more. Something protective. Something tender. The sorcerer raised his hands, and the shadows surged once more. But Leora and Kael were ready. Together, they moved as one, each anticipating the other's actions, each trusting the other's skill. Every strike, every dodge, every counter was a testament to their growing bond. The sorcerer faltered, caught off guard by their coordination. Leora seized the moment, breaking the bindings that held Lady Alara. The girl looked up, eyes wide, and whispered her thanks. Leora offered a small, reassuring smile. It was fleeting. The battle was not over, but the first victory had been won. They had reached the heart of darkness and survived, together. In that survival, something shifted between them. Trust became respect, respect became admiration, and admiration edged toward something deeper, though neither would speak it aloud, not yet. But even as they prepared to leave, Leora felt a shadow stir behind her. The sorcerers had one final trick, a hidden passage, a trap meant to swallow them whole. The floor shifted beneath her feet, and a magical barrier sealed them inside. Kale's hand found hers. "We've come too far to fail now," he said. She nodded, drawing strength from him as much as from herself. "Then we face it. Together." The shadows pressed closer, and the whispers returned. Louder now, more insistent. Leora's heart beat steadily, her mind clear, her resolve firm. She would not falter. She would not fail. Not for the Alpha's family, not for the kingdom, not for herself. And as the darkness closed in, she realized that the rogue had found something she had never expected: a partner, a companion, a reason to fight not only for survival, but for something greater. The sorcerer's lair loomed around them, a labyrinth of magic and menace. Their journey was far from over, and the danger only grew more intense. But Leora and Kale stood side by side, ready to face it, their bond forged in the fire of shadow and fear. The air inside the sorcerer's fortress was thick with magic. Shadows moved like living creatures, curling along the walls and ceilings, whispering secrets that chilled the soul. Every corner hid danger, every echo carried deceit. Leora's senses were sharp, every nerve alive, yet even she could feel the weight pressing in an ancient power that sought to overwhelm her. Kael walked beside her, silent but alert. He had never faced anything like this. The magic seemed to respond to their thoughts, twisting the world around them into a labyrinth of fear. Yet he did not falter. Leora's presence steadied him, even as her defiance inspired him. In her, he saw not only courage, but something deeper, something he could not name, but felt growing with every step. "Stay close," Leora whispered, her voice steady despite the unease curling around them. "These walls are alive. They watch. They listen. We cannot trust the shadows." Kael nodded, gripping his sword tighter. "I won't leave you," he replied. "Not now. Not ever." For a moment, her eyes met his. Something unspoken passed between them. A recognition. A bond forged in danger. Yet there was no time to linger on feelings. The fortress demanded attention. Each step a test of skill, wit, and courage. They moved cautiously through a narrow corridor, the walls etched with runes that pulsed with malevolent energy. Leora paused, her hand hovering over one of the symbols. She closed her eyes, murmuring words in a language lost to most. A song of old power that bent the magic without breaking it. The runes dimmed, and a path forward opened. Kael exhaled slowly. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "I survive," Leora replied, voice tight. "Remarkable is not necessary." They pressed forward, each step bringing them closer to the inner sanctum where Lady Alara had been held. But the fortress was cunning, designed to prey on fear and doubt. The shadows began to shape themselves into visions, images of their worst fears. Kael saw failure, the faces of those he had sworn to protect, now trapped in endless pain. His knees nearly buckled under the weight of his guilt, but Leora's hand on his arm grounded him. "You are stronger than this," she whispered. "Do not let them own you. Trust yourself. Trust me." Her words, simple yet unwavering, anchored him. He drew a deep breath and stepped forward, side by side with her. Together, they faced the illusions, breaking the hold of the shadows with each step. Finally, they reached a grand chamber at the fortress's heart. The walls shimmered with dark energy, and at its center stood the sorcerer's leader, a figure cloaked in shadows, eyes burning with hatred and cunning. Lady Alara sat bound upon a dais, pale but alive, her eyes wide with fear. "You are persistent," the sorcerer hissed, voice echoing through the chamber. "But persistence cannot save you. This is the end." Leora stepped forward, her stance steady, her gaze unwavering. "The end is not yours to command," she said. Her voice carried both defiance and calm, a balance that unnerved even the powerful sorcerer. Kael moved to her side, protective, ready to strike. "You will harm no one," he said firmly. His tone was both warning and promise. The sorcerer's eyes flared, and shadows erupted across the floor. They twisted and surged, reaching for Leora and Kael. The rogue struck first, moving with precision, deflecting the shadows with a combination of blade and whispered incantations. Kael followed, his sword a flash of steel, cutting through tendrils of darkness. The battle was intense. Shadows slithered across the walls, the ceiling, the floor, wrapping around them, trying to separate them. Yet every attack was met with resistance, every strike countered. Leora's cunning and Kael's discipline combined seamlessly, a dance of skill and trust. Amid the chaos, the rogue glimpsed the sorcerer's true plan. He was not just trying to trap them, he was trying to bind their very wills. to turn courage into fear and loyalty into betrayal. If he succeeded, Lady Ilara would remain imprisoned, and the shadows would spread across the kingdom. Leora gritted her teeth. She would not allow it. She drew upon every lesson, every skill, honed over years of survival. Shadows recoiled at her touch, magic bending to her will, not fully tamed, but enough to give her the edge. Kale sensed it too, and together, they pushed forward, breaking through the assault with a unity that surprised even them. In a final, desperate move, Leora leapt toward the dais, cutting the bindings that held Lady Ilara. The girl stumbled forward, free at last. Relief shone in her eyes, but there was no time to linger. The sorcerer's anger swelled, and the shadows surged again, more ferocious than before. Kale grabbed Leora's hand, holding her steady. "We end this together," he said, voice low, but fierce. "Yes," she agreed. "Together." The rogue and the guard struck in unison. Leora used the shadows against themselves, twisting them into knots, while Kale struck with precision, cutting through the sorcerer's defenses. The leader faltered, his power cracking under their combined force. For a moment, the chamber was still. Shadows lay broken and lifeless. The oppressive weight lifted. Leora and Kale stood side by side, breathing heavily, eyes locked. The danger had not fully passed, but victory had been claimed. Yet the fortress held one more secret, a hidden trap beneath the dais. The floor shifted, revealing a pit of darkness that threatened to swallow them all. Lady Ilara screamed, and Leora's reflexes saved her, catching her just as she began to fall. Kale acted immediately, helping both women back to solid ground. They were safe, for now. But the rogue felt it in her bones. This fortress, this sorcerer, had more to offer. More darkness, more tests. Their journey was far from over. As they paused, catching their breath, Kale looked at Leora. "You were incredible," he said quietly. "I've never seen anyone fight like you." She shook her head, brushing her hair from her face. "I survive," she replied softly. "That is all." But even she felt a shift within herself. The rogue, once entirely self-reliant, had found something she had never expected: partnership, trust, perhaps even connection. Kyle hesitated, then took a careful step closer. "We are stronger together," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "I want to stand by your side, always." Leora's eyes softened, though she said nothing. She had never allowed herself to consider such words, never trusted anyone enough to hear them. Yet, standing here amidst darkness and danger, she felt a flicker of warmth, a fragile, quiet hope. The fortress groaned around them, a reminder that the danger was not over. Shadows stirred in corners, whispering of ancient curses and traps yet to be revealed. Leora glanced toward the pit, then back at Kale. They would need every ounce of courage, every skill, every ounce of trust they had cultivated to survive what came next. Together, they moved toward the fortress exit, each step a test of strategy and courage. The rogue no longer felt alone. Kale was there, steadfast, a constant presence in the ever-shifting shadows. And in that presence, she discovered a new strength, one born not just of skill, but of connection, loyalty, and something deeper she had never allowed herself to name. The echoes of battle faded behind them, but the fortress was far from quiet. Somewhere in its depths, the sorcerer stirred, nursing anger and plotting revenge. The rogue and the guard had survived tonight, but the shadows would not forget. As they paused at the threshold of the fortress, Lady Ilara safe beside them, Leora looked back at the dark halls. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "This is not over. Not yet. But we will face it. Together." Kale's hand brushed hers again, just a fleeting touch, but enough to speak volumes. The rogue and the guard, once strangers, now allies, stood together in the moonlight. Their bond had deepened, forged in fire and shadow, and it would carry them through the dangers yet to come. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Leora realized that she no longer fought alone. She had found not only a companion in battle, but someone who understood her, who challenged her, who inspired her. Perhaps, she thought, the rogue could learn to trust, could learn to hope, could even learn to love. The fortress behind them still waited, full of secrets, shadows, and danger. And the rogue and the guard knew one truth above all. The next battle would test everything they had learned, everything they were, and everything they might become. The first light of dawn painted the sky in pale gold. Yet inside the fortress, darkness clung stubbornly to the corners. Shadows slithered along the walls, whispering threats and promises alike. Leora's muscles ached, her mind was sharp, but she felt no fear. She had fought through impossible odds before. This would be no different. Kale stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. He had been by her side through the forest, through the traps, and through the first assault of the sorcerers. Now, he would face the final test with her, whatever it might be. Their bond had grown, forged in the fires of survival, and each understood that trust alone could not defeat the darkness. They needed courage, wit, and determination. Leora's eyes scanned the grand chamber before them. The sorcerer's leader, though wounded and weakened from the previous battle, stood at the center. His figure radiated dark magic, the shadows around him writhing like living things. Yet he had underestimated her, underestimated them both. "This ends today," Leora said, voice steady, carrying the weight of conviction. "No more fear. No more games." The sorcerer laughed, a sound that echoed and twisted against the walls. "You think courage alone can defeat me? You are naive, rogue. Shadows do not bend to will, they devour it." Kale stepped forward, blade gleaming. "Not tonight," he said firmly. "We fight as one." Leora nodded, a brief but meaningful glance exchanged. Together, they advanced. Each movement coordinated, instinctive, precise. The shadows surged at them, the room twisting and stretching unnaturally, as if reality itself had grown uncertain. The sorcerer conjured a storm of darkness, striking with power and fury. Leora countered with her own skill, weaving through the assault, using her knowledge of ancient runes and old magic to bend the shadows to her advantage. Kale's sword cut through the attacks with unwavering focus, every strike precise, every motion protective. Yet the greatest challenge was not the sorcerer's magic, it was the fear he seeded in their hearts. Illusions of failure, despair, and loss surrounded them, whispering that they were powerless. Leora felt the familiar pang of doubt, memories of her past failures pressing against her resolve. Kale sensed it too, the moment when shadows sought to turn their minds against them. He moved closer to her, voice firm and clear. "Do not falter, not now. We are stronger than this. Together, we cannot be defeated." Her hand brushed against his, not by accident, but by choice. The simple contact carried meaning, trust, partnership, and something more. A spark that neither of them could deny. Leora drew strength from it, a fire ignited not by magic, but by connection. With renewed determination, she unleashed a counterstrike, twisting the shadows back upon themselves. Kale followed seamlessly, each strike synchronized with her movements. The sorcerer faltered, his attacks losing focus. The rogue and the guard moved as one, unstoppable, relentless. Finally, Leora saw her chance. She lunged forward, blade aimed with precision, breaking the sorcerer's hold over the shadows. The dark energy recoiled, hissing and dissipating. Kyle pressed the advantage, cutting through the last remnants of the magical assault. The chamber, fell silent. The sorcerer crumpled, defeated, the power that had seemed eternal now broken. Lady Ilara stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe and relief. "You saved us," she whispered, voice trembling. Leora shook her head, exhaustion and relief mingling in her expression. "We saved each other," she replied softly. Her gaze drifted to Kale, who returned it with the same quiet intensity. No words were needed. In the heat of danger, trust had grown into something unspoken but undeniable. Outside the fortress, the morning sun had begun to burn away the lingering shadows. The kingdom's forests seemed brighter, alive with possibility once more. Leora and Kael emerged from the fortress, Lady Ilara between them. The rogue had faced darkness, the sorcerer's traps, and her own past, and had emerged not only victorious, but changed. Word of her bravery spread through the kingdom quickly. Those who had whispered her name in fear now spoke it with respect. The rogue was no longer merely a shadow at the edge of the kingdom, she was a hero, a protector, a force that had saved not only the Alpha's family, but the future of Arendor itself. The Alpha himself, stern and proud, approached her. He had heard the story, seen the truth of her courage, and though he had once doubted her, he now recognized the value of her spirit. "You have done what few could," he said, voice steady. "You have saved my family, and in doing so, you have changed the kingdom." Leora inclined her head, acknowledging the words without arrogance. "I do not seek praise," she said simply. "I did what needed to be done." Kael stood close, his presence steady and reassuring. Their bond, forged in darkness, had become unbreakable. For the first time, Leora allowed herself to hope not just for survival, but for something more. The rogue, once feared and misunderstood, had found a companion, a partner, a potential for love she had never imagined. Yet even in triumph, the rogue's instincts remained sharp. The fortress, though defeated, had hinted at greater threats, older magic, and dangers that could arise again. Leora knew that vigilance would always be necessary, but she also knew that she would not face these challenges alone. Kael's hand brushed hers once more. A simple gesture, yet full of meaning. "We face whatever comes next. Together," he said. "Yes," Leora replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. The kingdom began to awaken around them. Birds sang in the trees, the sun glinted off the rivers, and a sense of calm returned to the land. Villagers, who had once feared her, now looked upon her with respect, some even bowing as she passed. The rogue had become a symbol, a reminder that courage and skill could come from the most unexpected places. In the days that followed, reforms began in the kingdom. The Alpha listened more, trusted those who had been overlooked, and worked to build a realm where fairness and justice could flourish. Leora, though she did not seek power or recognition, became a valued advisor, offering insight and wisdom drawn from years of navigating danger and deceit. And through it all, her relationship with Kael grew. No longer merely companions in battle, they found moments of quiet together, walking along sunlit paths, sharing stories of their pasts, and discovering a depth of connection neither had anticipated. The rogue, once defined by solitude, had found something stronger than independence: trust, partnership, and the beginnings of love. The kingdom of Arendor had been changed not only by the defeat of the sorcerers, but by the courage of one woman who refused to be bound by fear. Leora had faced shadows, both external and within herself, and emerged as a force of hope, a guardian of life and justice. Standing on a balcony overlooking the castle grounds, Leora felt the wind brush her face. Kael stepped beside her, silent, offering strength in the quiet. Lady Ilara played in the gardens below, laughter ringing like music. The rogue allowed herself a deep breath, savoring the moment. "They will still call me rogue," she murmured. And perhaps I always will be. But now, I am more than that. Kale's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. You are who you choose to be, he said. And right now, you are extraordinary. For the first time in her life, Leora believed it. She had saved a family, changed a kingdom, and found someone who understood her. Someone she could trust completely. The rogue was no longer alone. She had a partner, a friend, a protector, and perhaps even something more. As the sun rose higher, casting gold across the castle walls, shadows stirred faintly on the horizon. Ancient threats might remain. Whispers of magic and darkness still lingered. But for now, the kingdom was safe. Leora and Kael stood together, ready to face whatever came next, confident that together, they could overcome anything. And in that moment, the rogue smiled, finally allowing herself to embrace the possibility of hope, of love, and of a future shaped not by fear, but by courage and choice.